Aloha mai kako. O Nick Kalamakani Francisco Ko'inoa. My name is Nick Kalamakani Francisco, and you have arrived at the right session. You are here today live. Our session is called Mo'olelo, Our Treasured Resources Part 2, with our featured presenter coming back for round 2, our very own Kumu Kawaʻa. That's right, the one and only. Considered a living treasure by many, receiving many awards throughout his work in the community, tirelessly serving our lahui and teaching us all about the role of the practices of kapo'e kahiko, the people of the past here in Hawaii, and sharing with us all that he learned from Halawa Moloka'i. And just we're so thankful to have Kumu Kawaʻa here with us today. Today's session is a workshop, and Kumu Kawaʻa is going to be sharing some mo'olelos. I'm going to be asking him some questions. I'm going to be the moderator today. But we hope that you did your ha'awina, your homework, and brought a mo'olelo to share. So please know, again, this is being recorded, so hopefully you're okay with sharing a mo'olelo, a story with us later today. But I'm going to kick it over to our star, the one and only, the fantabulous Kumu Kawaʻa.
Ui, pe mai nei ia o ko wapau I ho'olohe mai nei ke kaniana o ko uleo o Kawa'a mai halawa mai o Moloka'i. Uhanau ia ma ke lawahi o halawa, ua ho'opulupula ia ma ka lo'i kalo, ua hanai ia I ka ai mai ke kai a me ka aina a pau. It says, aloha. Aloha ia o ko wapau e na pu o Hawaii, a pela pu ho e ona po I ho'olohe ana mai ka aina hau a me ka honua a pau. Greeting to each and every one of you, for those of you who were born in this great place called Hawaii, and to our guests who are listening from the mainland and from around the world as well. I am Kawa'a, and I have to say that I am from Halawa, Moloka'i, because if I say just Halawa, they think that I just got out of prison. It's a story that I have, and maybe I'll tell about it, but I already told that story last time. So today's discussion is about mo'olelo, and it is a let's take a setting as if we are in your tutu's kitchen, where most of the discussions and the teaching and stories you heard took place. So that's the kind of setting that we want to set up for today. Why is mo'olelo important? I said, heha ka waiwai o mo'olelo. Well, it's simple for me. Is that before the arrival of the missionaries again, this is a review. It's that we didn't have a written language, so much of what we received about what our ancestors, what our mothers and fathers and our grandfathers did, were captured and preserved in mo'olelo and then shared with us at different times and in different ways as well. But we also heard mo'olelo told in schools, and then we also heard it at church. We would hear it at the beach. We would hear it when we are sitting and waiting for a deer to be trapped in our trap. All of those are all stories. I cannot tell you how important it is to tell stories to your youngsters. Because we didn't have books, we could not read the books. And it's only when the books came that we were able to read. And then my mother would read to us, and then my father would read to us. But prior to that, most of the lessons were taught by way of mo'olelo. My father was a very, very good storyteller, but he wasn't that good in telling stories to us. But fortunately for my brothers and I, and those of us who lived in the valley of Halawa, there was an old man called John Akina, and he was my father's uncle, so he was my granduncle. He was also a konohiki of the island, even though he wasn't appointed by an ali'i to be the konohiki, but he simply played the role as konohiki. What does that mean in Konohiki? Well, if you live in Halawa, the number one source of income is growing taro. And in order to grow taro, you need to have water running from the stream into the poʻawai and into the ditches, and from there down to the lo'is. So he managed the water and the constant flowing of the water and the cleaning of the ditches, so that everyone on the right side of the valley could have water. On the other side of the valley was his uncle, and there was another poʻawai and another stream, poʻawai and an awai on that side of the valley, and he managed that. Both of those are relatives of mine, so I grew up knowing about him later on in life, that the role that he played for us was Konohiki. And I'm fortunate to be born at that time. It wasn't easy, but that's also a great story, because he was around, and we would go to him and ask the same questions, or to talk about what my father did that we didn't like, and then he would explain to us. So he was not only the Konohiki, but he was also a teacher. But that was also the role of every man and woman that grew up in Halawa, that grew up in Wailua, that grew up in Hana, that grew up in Kona, that their roles were not only to take care of the family, but also as teachers and as counselors and as kahu and as la'au lapa'au. So our ancestors were rich in knowledge, and a great many of them were great teachers, but there were also some horrible teachers as well. So by all means, don't believe that everybody's a good teacher. And so I grew up at that point in time, and this is school. This is every day I walked 2 miles to school every day, because we lived in a valley. The valley is about 8 miles long, from Kiha, which is the beach out front, to Mo'ula, which is at the very, very end of the valley. Mo'ula is also an ahapua'a. Mo'ula is also the waterfall, the biggest waterfall in Halawa. So there's Mo'ula, the biggest, and then there is Makaʻeleʻele and Hipupua and Kaio. These are all names of the waterfalls in Halawa. That's place-based learning, gang. And so I lived in a place called Opele, my grandfather's land, which was a land grant from the king. And like many of the people in the valley who had land, those were all land grants from the king. It wasn't an easy life, but it was a great life, because it was fun to grow up in there. And everything that I did today are stories. Everything that I did in that valley are stories, are mo'olelo. And I share that mo'olelo with whomever wants to listen. And even if they don't want to listen, they have to listen, because oftentimes I'm the kumu, so I get to tell the stories. So how many of you have stories? Yeah, and how many of you share that stories? How many of you share the stories? Like dads, they like to talk the story about the high school and the football game. That's also important. But what about ancestral stories? Those are the kind of stories that need to be told. Last night I was on a video working with the Waimanalo Health Center medical team that's doing a research. And that team interviewed a great deal of Hawaiians with ike. Young Hawaiians, middle-aged Hawaiians, and old Hawaiians. And you know which category I fall in. It's certainly not the young. And there are a lot of stories that were captured in that, and those stories are going to be passed on. How many of you know your own story about your family? In this research, one of the researchers used the word Ike Hawaii. And so I thought about the word Ike Hawaii, and I said, I have a definition of that word, of that phrase, Ike Hawaii. But is it clear for the audience? And the audience include those with PhD, with masters, with BA, with high school, and also for sixth graders. Do they know what that term Ike Hawaii means? So I know that there are many who have that phrase Ike Hawaii is not clear. And so I took the opportunity last night to define that in more simple terms. I tend to take complex ideas or questions or phrases and break it down to the simplest form. I have to do that first, to take the question and then to ask that question in Hawaiian for myself, to understand it from a Hawaiian perspective first, so I can translate it into English, and so I can talk about it in English. How many of you do that? Don't answer the question. So the word is Ike Hawaii. You know, what does that mean for you? So let's start for the Ike Hawaii. Nick, what does Ike Hawaii means for you? How would you translate Ike Hawaii?
I would
Take a break. Well, I'm asking Nick, I'm asking each and every one of you that question as well. So you should think about it. You should think about it.
So Kumu, for me, when I think of the term,
Wait, Nick, don't jump. I said, Nick, so my glasses is too small, and then let me look at this lady who is in red. Yeah, Iokepa. I want you to share what Ike Hawaii means for you after you hear Nick, and then I'll have my explanation. Iokepa. Put up your finger like this, your thumb. Let's say you got it.
I got it.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Nick.
when I
Ike
hear
Hawaii. What does Ike Hawaii mean to you?
it means all of the thinking and the knowledge that has been passed down from countless generations that we have today. That's what it means to me.
Ike Hawaii. Okay. Oe, Iokepa. Okay, go ahead.
Although I was born and raised here,
That's all right.
I'm just starting to learn more about my family, and they were a famous family. You know, the Brown Nathaniels in Hilo, and hard for me to say.
That's all right. It's okay. Yes. So this is my time, and I'm supposed to be lecturing. But if I just lecture, it's not so good. It's a learning opportunity. And if you don't know, you just say don't know. It's okay. It's okay. That's what you take in. Conway, what is Ike Hawaii to you?
Aloha. Yeah, I teach at Kamehameha, and I've been teaching there. This is my 7th year in middle school. I do have some indigenous ancestry from North America, and it's been, I don't have any connection to it. So teaching at Kamehameha and participating in rituals and ceremonies has opened my eyes to Ike Hawaii, and it's been passed to me from my colleagues,
Let me get ready.
my students, and to me, it's I mean, I agree with Nick, but I also see it. I realized through study that some people have Ike Hawaii without even knowing it.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you, Conway.
It can be
Yeah.
gestures.
Let me take it. Ike Hawaii. What does that mean? What does that mean for you?
Aloha Kumu. For me, I feel Ike Hawaii means knowledge that has been passed down from our ancestors of the past and how we can apply it in today's life or in today's world, and just to maybe continue or to improve Hawaii and Hawaiians' lives.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. All good answers. All good answers. And so, when we see that when it's written and we talk about it, Ike Hawaii, it said, when I read it, it said, it's not clear. It's not clear. I mean, I have a definition, but the idea is to make it clear so that everyone in the class understands what that phrase Ike Hawaii means. We say it so freely, but what about the sixth grader, or what about the third grader that she understands that what we're talking about? So and you all hit it. Ike Hawaii is ancestral knowledge that's passed on from generation to generation to generation. Ike Hawaii. That's what it is. And like for instance, is it how many of you folks go paddle canoe? And how many folks know a little bit about the canoe? Why is the manu okay, Conway, why is the manu called the manu?
I've forgotten. I don't paddle too often, so.
Oh, that's all right. So whatever that topic is, so the canoe builders is that when youngsters are around, they receive instructions on what to do, but they also get to hear the stories of the people who are there, who are carving, about that time when that group went to Wailau on Molokai, and on the way back, the canoe tipped over, and all the opihi and all the fish were floating, and the bags of fish were all floating around, and people were swimming around, and the mother, and there was a woman who was hapai on that canoe. And so later on, they gathered all their fish, everybody was safe, they made it back to shore, and a couple of months later, that mother gave birth to the child. And what do you think she named her child? What would you name that child? Think Hawaiian. What would you name that child? 7, 8, 9, 10. She named that child Aukai. In that name Aukai is the moʻolelo, is the story. That's how we capture and we preserve. So, how many of you have Hawaiian names? Do you know the interpretation of your Hawaiian names? And do you know the story behind the receiving of that name? That's all part of moʻolelo. I said, for example, it says, I don't have a name, a Hawaiian name. And I know why I don't have a Hawaiian name, because my mother told me the story, and then my father told me the story, and then my grand-uncle told me the story that was a little deeper than my mother's and a little deeper than my father's story. So it is from my great uncle, I got the same story, but even deeper with more meanings. And and the challenges that my mother and father faced. Yes, and what that means is this: is that my second sister, the second oldest, was named after my grandmother, and my grandmother's name was so powerful that it was told to my mother and father never to name any of us that name. So my second sister died because the name was Kapu. Not even a member in the family could have that name. That's a short version of the story why I don't have a Hawaiian name. But I do have a Hawaiian last name, Kawa'a. And in that name, I have the liberty of translating it. I know the true meaning of the name, but I also embellish it to make it fun, to make it enjoyable for the listeners. And so I have an interpretation that's when I'm talking to PhDs. I also have an interpretation of that name for fourth graders. Stories. Yeah. So if we want the story to be received and kept, we have to find a way to share it so that it sticks like gum on a cat. Like gum on a cat.
So
how are we doing? Go ahead.
I just wanted to come back to some of the themes that you've already mentioned. So you talked about growing up in Halawa, Moloka'i, and you shared some moʻolelos of your tutu akina, and the konohiki kuleanas that he had. You also explained that in the valley, all of the elders had the responsibility to share moʻolelo and to teach. So you also talked about how in sharing moʻolelo, we need to ensure that there's understanding by all of our audience. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of maybe modifying your delivery when you tell a moʻolelo, and give some examples of how in different audiences you would share the same moʻolelo, but just tweak it a little bit to ensure understanding based upon the audience?
Well, how many of you know the story of Ha'aloha? That's just one of the stories that I'm talking about. It could be Jack and Jill. It could be it could be a story of Casablanca. It could be telling the story of Dancing with Wolves. How many of you can share your story, that same story, to preschoolers? How many of you can share that story about the story of creation and Ha'aloha to preschoolers, to second graders, and also share it to those who are in their master's degree level? They said, so and I asked that question because my father had a certain way of teaching us, and because I was his son and because we were his children, it was more done in a teaching way. But when that same story was told by my granduncle, it had a little flair. It was more relaxed, and he embellished it a little bit. So he made it interesting. For example, Ho'oho Ku Kalani. Yeah, actually, her name is Hoku Kalani. But this is where, and lesson time, the name of the woman in the class, in the story, is Hoku Kalani. But I take liberties to change it, Ho'oho Kalani. But I tell the audience that I'm adding to the name so that they know that that young girl's name is Hoku Kalani. That I'm adding the name Hoku Kalani because I want to add to that story. And so the story goes on like this: is that this man who was riding on the wings of the wind, this handsome, good-looking guy, and he was looking for a mate. And he went and from Kaʻa, the clouds on Kaʻa. You see, I'm embellishing this one because I'm talking to Nanakuli people. So I use the cloud of Kaʻa and I use the mountain of Kaʻa. And then he saw this woman, and her name was Ho'oku Kalani. Ho'oku Kalani. And she just pau au au. Just pau au au. And there's lots of water in her hair. And so she didn't have a towel. She didn't She didn't have a towel to dry her hair. And so she leaned, she put her head down towards her knee, and her hair drooped down to the ground, and she swung to the left and to the right and to the left and the right, and all the dew in her hair flew up into the heavens, and they became stars. Nice, huh? And so that's Hoku Kalani, the stars in the heaven. But I added to that story that she swung around her hair, and I tell them, I said, I made it fitting for you. So the kids can see that. And so I tell the ladies to do that. Now, you cannot tell me to do that because I don't have hair. But at one point in time, Nick had long hair, so he could do it if he had long.
Those days are long gone, Kumu.
Those days are long gone.
I'm on my way to catch up with you.
I'm on my way to catch up with you.
I really like how you modified the mo'olelo to really paint a picture, but you're still holding true to the essential components of the mo'olelo. You're not changing the traditional mo'olelo, but you're just adding and pushing based upon your audience. So that's my ka'i for telling stories for future generations.
And so I tell the audience that I am altering it a little bit so that they don't take it literally as the story that's handed down from generation to generation. And so I tell them where I made the change. So I added ho'o to Hoku Kalani. And because that ho'o means two star. And so there's no way in the story that was told to me that she dried her hair. But how nice it is to paint a picture in words about how the stars ended up in the heavens above. I mean, just kinds of paints of pictures. That's mo'olelo. And that's the importance of it. And when you ad lib to it like that, it just draws the crowd in more. Because if you just leave it the way it is, it's kind of boring, So you have to add a little flair to it to make it. When you add a little flair, it attracts the attention of the listener. And it is more likely that the listener will pick up all of it or some of it. And to hear it again and then again, and then later on, we will all have that story. That's mo'olelo. Thank you for asking the question, Nick.
I appreciate you answering it and doing it so eloquently. My next question for you, Kumu, is
I don't want you to, Nick. I don't want you to be asking all the questions. I want you to leave some time so that the people can ask questions soon. Now,
okay. Lindsay has a question. Lindsay?
Hi, aloha. Yes.
Go ahead, Lindsay. Lindsay, tell us who you are and where you are a little bit. Give us a little bit more about you.
I born and raised in Palolo, Oahu, and live in Manoa.
I
work at Manoa Heritage Center. Met you in the.
My goodness! Oh my goodness!
Hi.
Aloha mai.
So I enjoy hearing all the ike you have to share, especially with mo'olelo, because that's what we do with the keiki a lot.
Yes, good.
And I guess one thing I struggle with telling mo'olelo, especially to different age groups, is like sticking true to the mo'olelo, because I notice that people hear what they want to hear and they will change it in their own way, in their own mind. Like when the keiki write mahalo notes back, all of a sudden there's this part of the story that wasn't you know, that anyway, that they take with them. And then I kind of fear that the stories just are going to shift as they retell it, as they remember it and they retell it. And I want, you know, I really want to carry on. Anyway, so what you were just talking about was good. But then one thing that I think about is like the people of Kaʻala or that side, they're going to probably think it's special to their Kaʻala because you put that place name in. So do you really kind of tell them that, oh, this is embellished, this place name is embellished? Like, you know, how do you stay true to pass on the ike, but also make it relevant? Or like, what do you, you know, I don't know how to explain what I'm asking. But.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. No, not if. I am telling the story to preschoolers. Do you think that they would remember the details of the story? No. Just bits and pieces of the story. So your responsibility becomes is that as they get older, it's important to say, I am adding personal flair to it. I said, for example, as I did, her name is Hoku Kalani. But today, I'm going to change the name to Ho'ohoku Kalani because I have a little story that goes with the word Ho'o, Hoku. So you see, so you've done your work. You've done your work, and you tell so that you're not saying to the audience, this is the story. You're telling your audience that you alter it a little bit to add a little flair, to add a little.
Mahalo, I will definitely use that tip in the future.
There you go. Thank you for asking the question. Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate, Lindsay, you asking the questions, and we want to encourage others to ask questions as well. Kumu Kawaʻa shared a little bit about the importance of names and knowing your name and those moʻolelos. Those of you who came to last month's session with Kawa'a, where there was a ha'awina to bring a moʻolelo related to your place or your name or something. Would anyone like to share a moʻolelo with us all? All right, I'm going to start calling on people. Okay, so let's see. What about Robert? Robert, would you mind unmuting and sharing a little bit?
Is this Robert Hawaii?
This is Robert. All right.
I ran into Uncle Earl actually doing a board and stone class. When I learned of this happening, I also was here at the last meeting.
You were. Hi, Robert.
Aukai. Aukai is connected to me through Halava.
Oh.
So I have an anti-Aukai na Hopi.
Aha.
So when you brought up that name Aukai, it took me back to Molokai, where my ohana is from, actually Ines.
That's right.
But then I know Uncle Earl knows my mom Emma.
Mm-hmm.
But she was Hanai to the Akina family in Honolulu. So I grew up kind of split between two families, but I thought I was being more blessed because I have more grandparents and more cousins.
Yeah.
So as far as my name, if we go back in time, my name actually goes back to Ka'u on the Big Island. But my real name is supposed to be, my last name is Kili'ikuli, not Kahawaii. Somehow along the line, my great grandfather, his last name was Kili'ikuli, but was changed to Kahawaii somehow along the line, but I don't know how or why. to me, that's not important. To me, it's important in what you do with your name to make that name count in life.
Mm-hmm.
And Uncle Earl has been a good inspiration, I guess, in a lot of ways. Touched a lot of lives. And as I went through the Board and Stones class, I went there for the Board and Stone, but I came away with much more, I guess, love for not just for Hawaii or for what it stands for, Kūpuna, or for basically what's family is what we got from this one. It brings a family together and to be able to malama everything around us through that.
How wonderful.
Thank you, Uncle Earl, for that. So that's where I live in Laie now. I was in the military for 30 years in the Navy. I just retired from Hawaiian Electric from 21 years. And still trying to push forward and do better every day.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, Uncle Earl.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Emma lived in Laie. So do you live in Mama's house?
Actually, it's next door in my grandfather's old house.
In your grandfather's old house. So I used to visit your mom. And so we had long stories. And so I'm very familiar with the family and the genealogy of the family. So nice to have you. Nice to have you on. Were you in the Punalu'u class?
Yes, we were.
Okay. Wait. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Back to you, Nick.
Well, mahalo for sharing, Robert. We really appreciate that. Would anyone else like to share a little bit about their ohana? And we got one more. Oh, terrific. Okay. All right. We got Billy. I'm going to add you a spotlight. Okay. There we go.
Oh, not spotlight. Aloha. My name is Billy Ann Uilani Sauking Aina Tera. So the mo'olelo about my name is my father's is William Aina from Keaukaha. And he is the 7th child of his family. So I am the 4th child. And so when I got older, I asked my dad, how come you name me Billy? How come you name me after you? Since I'm the 4th and I have an older brother and 2 older sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I wanted to have somebody named after me. So there you go. I was like, oh, okay. And then my Hawaiian name is Uilani. So one of the things about my name, Uilani, is I've always felt that I wasn't connected to that name. That for some reason, when, in halau and any of my kids, they would ask me, would you like to go by Uilani? And I had always like no, kind of a feeling. And my mother told me the story that on the day of my birth, I was born on my brother's birthday, exactly 1 year apart. So she was at Tripler Hospital here on the island of Oahu. And she said she thought that my name should be Milani, but that it sounded too close to the subdivision that was coming up, Mililani. So she said, maybe that is not the name. And that actually was going to be named after my father's cousin, Milani Stevens, who was married to William Aina, that was named after him.
Okay.
And so I was like, so Hawaiian. It's so Hawaiian. And then I was like, oh, so how did you get Uilani? So she said, well, there was a woman who was next to her in the same,
excuse me,
who thought she was going to have a girl. And if she had a girl, she was going to name that girl Hu'ilani. So she told my mom, would you like to name her Hu'ilani? So my mom said, sure. Okay. And then my Chinese name, I'm also named after my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Sao King. That her name, that's her Chinese name. So when we became a state, they got to choose their Western name. So she chose Violet. Oh,
Violet,
yeah, so fast forward, you know, I was at my auntie's funeral 2 years ago, and I ran into my cousin Milani. And I said to her, you know what, Milani? My name, I was originally supposed to be named after you. And she said, why? I didn't know that. Right? So 60 years later, she didn't know that. And she thought how honored because there was a special connection. And then she told me, you know, my husband is named after your daddy.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, I kind of knew it, but you know, all those fragmented pieces started to. So then I thought, I better go look at what the name Milani means. Right? 60 years later, I look, and me means to dream, not shishi, but to dream. And I'm also a dreamer, and I receive messages from my Kūpuna through my dreams. Thinking about myself, I then go,
excuse me.
why? My mother actually was supposed to name me Milani.
Milani.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then the last part of that mo'olelo, because you know we always get stories, is that in researching my genealogy in the last 2 years, I actually found out that my dad was named after his Hanai dad, who married my tutu, his mama, and it was William. And then I found out that my brother Jeffrey, was also named after this person. So that's my mo'olelo.
Wow. That is quite a mo'olelo. That is about genealogy, and that is only 1/8 of a whole story. Yeah. So the question, that I have for you and for all the others is, are you telling this to somebody in the family?
Yes. And I tell my children their story. I also know the story about my sister's names, my brother's names, and they don't know their story, their names of their stories. I mean, their story of their name. And then, my grandfather also is the only one of 7 that has a Hawaiian name, and his is Ka'onohi.
Ka'onohi.
And when I researched, not using the Gregorian calendar, but the Hawaiian calendar, he was born in the year of Halley's Comet.
Of who?
Halley's Comet.
Oh.
So, Ka'onohi o Kala. So
Ka'onohi o Kala, yeah.
Yeah, so in the researching of my own self, uncovering these momis.
Yeah.
So when I see Ilani is here, I see Momi is here.
Yeah.
It just is like, interesting. There's no coincidences, so.
Yeah. So, and my wife read. She was fascinated and intrigued by Ka'ulani, and well, because the way she was dressed. Because my wife is Haole. My wife is a Polish Jew, and there's a long story how I ended up marrying a Polish Jew, and where I met this Polish Jew. But I will tell you, I met her on a reservation Yes, that's when I had lots of hair on my head, and I was all about 21 and handsome and good looking. Anyway, and so when we got married, and then she has a very, very high IQ, and she reads a lot, and she came across Kaiulani, and she was just fascinated with the life and also the clothing that she wore. And she wanted to name her Kaiulani. And in my lack of brilliancy at that point in time, I said, I agreed to use the name Kaiulani, to give it to my daughter. And then my daughter got sick. And so, got sick. And then I'm a Hawaiian. And so you go see the doctor and they say, well, I'm not sure what it is. The moment I hear, I'm not sure what it is, it's time to go Hawaiian. So I make the call to my mama, on Molokai. She says, fly up this week. So they said, we're going up to Molokai. What? We're going up to Molokai, and you cannot wear gloves and you cannot wear hat. You have to wear jeans and t-shirt to go to Molokai. Now my wife, what? I don't wear dress, I don't wear stockings, and no, you're gonna wear slippers and shoes and t-shirt. We're going to Molokai. Long story short. So you hear that line that I have, long story short? That's to tell your audience that there is a bigger and a greater story. In long story short, to make it short. So what happened is that, my mother already knew. She already knew. And so what I had done is that I had violated. I chose a name outside of the family that doesn't belong to me. It belongs to that lineage. And I made a mistake. I said, because my wife wanted it, and I said, I too became fascinated and learned even more about Kaiulani. And so I was blinded by the practice, and so I named her. And so went back to Molokai to do Ho'oponopono. And so my mother lifted the kapu on that name for my daughter only. My mother does not have the right to lift the kapu of that name of someone else's name. So she just made the name free for my daughter to use. Okay? That's a lesson for all of you. It's a lesson for all of you. So I knew that it is kapu, not to use that name. And so in our names are a great deal of stories to vehe and to understand where it comes. It's not just a name. Well, at least in Kahiko times. Now, in modern times, people say they go to the dictionary, and they look at words and they put the two words together, Hemea kapa e kela, you cannot help. They don't have good sources to go to ask for help, so they do the best they can. Their intentions are well, but it is not the way to name, is to find someone. Another story is that in the Waimanalo Board and Stone class, no, let me start here before I go to the Waimanalo Board and Stone class. Are there any questions with regards to my daughters receiving the name Kaiulani? About what I said. I did say I violated cultural practice, took a name that did not belong to my family, and gave it to my name. And because I did that, there's still kapu on that name. So kapu on that name. That means be careful about whose name you use. And as a result, got sick. Fortunately, my mother can do ho'oponopono, so she asked Keakua to hapai, to lift the kaumaha, the kapu on that. Yeah, only for her.
Kumu, I just wanted to say mahalo for sharing that mo'olelo, and as well mahalo to Billy Uilani Aina for sharing her mo'olelo.
Really, we'd have to go 6 weeks to hear the whole story.
That's how it goes, right? Yeah. All the connections are so deep.
So it's one of the things that I appreciate about Kamehameha schools. mahalo pawahi, my 3 children are graduated. But in the year when my son, maybe 2005, they added to the application, do you know your mo'olelo about your name? And I thought,
Wonderful, wonderful.
what a great question. What a great question.
Yes,
And
wonderful.
Kumu, would you share a little bit about? We're gonna Billy. That's such a great point, and that is one of the things that we're gonna be talking about after this. But before we get to that, I'd like to connect.
How are we doing? How are we doing on time?
We're doing fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, you're doing a great job as always. Okay, but Kumu. So my question to you
Hey,
is:
do we have only 20 minutes left?
no, it goes to 11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 11. So no worries. So my question, Kumu, is you talked about some of the naming practices and how in the case of your daughter, that was not you didn't follow protocol. Could you share a little bit about some of the Hawaiian naming practices that you're familiar with? Maybe some of the kapu surrounding naming practices. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this topic?
Well, last time the homework that I gave you folks is that you were to go to Nana Ike Kumuan and to read the story about Tutu Pukui receiving a name, the second name that was in line for her to receive, and by so receiving that second name, she was ill, and like my daughter got ill, whether she got ill and went to see someone in the family, as I went to see my mother in the family, and found out that and Tutu Pukui found out that there was a name that was an Inoa Po. There is a name that came to a dream that she was supposed to be named, but didn't get that name and received a second name from the mother, I believe, and she too got ill. So it's a great question, and it's a 2-day lecture on Hawaiian naming practice. But to make the story short and simple, in Board and Stone class, I talked about Hawaiian naming practice, and these 3 names that I will share with you are the uhane kind of names. These are spiritual, the highest order of naming practice, and one of them is the Inoa Po. And Inoa Po means, well, first of all, is that when a child is when the family knows that there is a child to come into the family, and that means the mother is hapai, there is one in the family that is his or her job to look for the name. That's not the case today. The case today, it is left to the mother and father to come up with the name. I ka wā kahiko o nā po e Kūpuna me ka ike Hawaiʻi I kahea ana mai, I noʻonoʻo ana mai e lawe aku I ka inoa. In the days of the old, there was an individual in the family whose role, one of the roles, is to name the children. And so in so doing, what that does is that it protects the child, it protects the family, the Hawaiian naming practice. So the first one I want to talk about is Inoa Po. And so, tutu, the tutu in the family would say, "Eh, kia kua," now it's kia kua, but in the olden days it is mana, ku, lono, ke ele ana mai ke kai keiki. So they would appeal to the higher powers and to say that there is a child coming and that might there be some help from there to name this child. And they may ask for a certain kinds of name because they want this child to have a certain personality and to have a certain role in life. It's not just naming. You know, the naming is purposeful. It's calculated. It's thought about. It's about breaking new ground. It's about protecting information. I'll explain that. That's a little confusion, but later on I will shred that a little bit more in the second part of the definition of names. So inoapo, it comes to you by night in a dream. That's one. And then ula leo is the second type of naming practice that is spiritually guarded. Ula leo. That means you may hear it in a voice. And you may be working, you may be sleeping, you may be throwing net, I mean, you may be building a stone wall, you may be pounding a poi, and then you hear a name. You hear a name. That's ula leo. You got to be careful if you know that you have a name that you was named by way of ula leo. You need to be careful when you're around psychologists or psychiatrists, because when you say that you that you heard a voice, then, quickly they're going to think that you probably forgot to take your Prozac, or that you're coming off your medication, and that you're nuts or you're crazy. Let them think of it as, just know that you receive, or there is a thing called ula leo. And then the other is ho'ailona, is that you may see a sign, and that sign may be the flashing of the sun. It may be a thunder, a lightning. It may be the dawn of the new day. Yeah, where ka papalina lahi lahi breaks over the ocean, the horizon, the moana. When the sun just comes up over the ocean like this over there. See, and then that may be a sign that you see when you're thinking about the name, and it appears for you. It might be it might be a bird. It might be something that you see when you're driving to work.
Mike, could you repeat what that was called?
Say again.
Could you repeat what that was called?
Oh, that's Nick. Will you repeat it? It may be the sound of my voice.
Yeah. So I actually put it in the chat, Lindsay. I believe that was you asking. Inoa Po is the dream name. Ula leo is the voice which comes to you. And then ho'ailona is the sign from nature. Yeah. So that. Yeah.
A vision.
A vision. Okay. So a vision based upon the sign from nature. Yeah.
So one day, here's a story about ho'ailona. Is that Kalahiki was called by his daughter to say, "Dad, will you please pick a name for my daughter?" And the long story short, and she said, "Dad, I'm in the hospital and I'm giving birth and I don't have a name for my daughter. And it's been months." And so this is his story that's telling it to me. And so he said he received the call and he was climbing up what is called Crouching Lion. That's Kahana Bay. That's the entrance to Kahana Bay on the left side. As you're going down, you get to the road, and then there's that. He was climbing up, and he received the call from his daughter to say, "Dad, I'm in the hospital, and I don't have a name for the baby." And he said that he was climbing up, and he was going to harvest lehua to make a lei. And when he received the call, he was climbing up. It was cloudy, and he said, and the clouds parted. And it opened up, and he said the sky was so beautiful, yeah. And so he said, uilani, yeah, this is beautiful. That's what came to him. That is an example of ho'ailona. Yeah, that's his story. You may use that story to explain it, but you make sure when you use that story, you say you got it from Kawa'a, and Kawa'a got it from Kalahiki. Because if you don't, that's Aihue. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, well, mahalo Kumu. I just wanted to open the floor up to anyone else who would like to share a mo'olelo. We would really, really appreciate. Maybe it's the way that you named your child, or maybe it was the mo'olelo of how you got your name. While we're waiting for somebody to be brave, Kumu, you have something to add?
Yeah. Now, Nick just asked me, because of time, I just talked about the 3 highest level of Hawaiian naming practice. There's a whole other list of naming practice. For example, these 3 that I named are all inoa kapu. When does an inoa kapu does not have the kapu is another subject on Hawaiian naming practice. It's a day lecture on the topic. Maybe even 2 days to be able to teach Hawaiian naming practice is to have a long session, which means it could be about 4 sessions. I would like to have 4 sessions to talk about Hawaiian naming practice. That's just so that for the audience to know that it is not a simple process, that it is a complex process. Let me end like this with regards to that. So, the Akaka brothers all have names, Abraham, John, Daniel. I'll just stop at those 3. And there are others that have other names on that, but I'll just tell that. And so we know that the Akaka name carries a great deal of mana and power because of that name Akaka. Well, I got this because I went to Kauai and I was around Reverend Akaka and John Akaka and Daniel Akaka, and so the parents wanted their sons and daughters to follow after those individuals who in the Bible carried those names, and they wanted the characters of those individuals and the hearts of those individuals to be embedded in their siblings. And so they named the first one Abraham, because they wanted that first son to be like Abraham in the Bible. And Abraham Akaka is very much lived up to his name like the Abraham in the Bible and the Abraham Akaka of Kauai Church. The oldest son, I think, is called John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, even though he had a rough ending, his job was the preacher. And so when I went to when I attended Kauai Church, from when I left Molokai and came here, and as I got older and I began to analyze the names and the behaviors of those individuals, of those men who had those names, and I said John was very much like John the Baptist. He had the demeanor, he had the sound, and his way of talking was very much, you're strong. You better do this, He was like a preacher. He was the guy who was pounding the street, and that was his ano, and that's what they wanted in that son. And then lastly, they named the last one Daniel, which became Daniel. And we know the story that Daniel ended up in the den, right? Daniel in the den. That's a biblical story. And where did Daniel Akaka end up? He ended up in the den called Washington, D.C.
Mahalo. Kumu, you get more for that one?
Hawaiian naming practice, huh?
Wonderful. I just wanted to interrupt Kumu Kawaʻa to let you know that Lindsay actually is let me know that she would like to share a mo'olelo. So
Ikino. Go ahead, Lindsay.
So my son that you guys have seen flash through the screen, the whole pregnancy I was praying for any of those 3 ways that you mentioned for a name to come, and nothing came significantly, I guess, in those 3 ways. So in that last day, in that last 45 minutes before we were to leave the hospital, and they said, claim your son's name now or go through a longer process later. We were just trying to think, and we ended up naming him after his birth story, which is, so his name is Waimaka Pili. Waimaka, tear, Pili, to adhere, to cling, to connect. And he kind of had like a clogged eye duct. So for the first few weeks of his life, he had choke maka pia pia in that one eye. So yeah, so we named him after that, and I was lucky to have somebody to kind of help me formulate that inoa. Based on like the what I told my kumu, and but within it also there is telling of the time. So we call him Pili for short, and for me, Pili represents the connection that we were really, really noticed because of COVID, the connection that we all really needed. So to me, that tells of the time that he was born, the era, and then the breaking down all of it. Vai, so he's Aries, an Aries baby born in the Chinese New Year, the Chinese year of the ox.
Oh.
So
the hawk, yeah?
no, the ox. Sorry, the ox.
Oh, the ox, okay.
So he's very much po'o.
Strong.
Yeah. My kumu suggested to give him a name with Vai in it. So that Vai, to kind of calm him.
Yeah.
And by Maka, to me, I was going through a form of healing myself. I guess a personal po'oponopono, and to me, Waimaka is a form of healing, that's salt water. So anyway, you break the name up 100 different ways, and there is significance to it. It's not something that you mentioned, but I guess that could be a good way to name the kid.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So yes, so what she did is that she used the Hawaiian naming practice, and that is the situation that that child is in is named somehow. That child is named to that situation it's in. That's not a very clear definition. Let me give you a clearer definition and a story that ties into how she named her child. Yeah. So there is a woman in Kona, and her name is Ka'aina o Kahaku. Does anyone speak Hawaiian in the group? Ka'aina. Nick, you have Hawaiian.
I didn't formally study ʻŌlelo Hawaii, but
Okay.
I have a very limited knowledge. What was the name again, Kumu?
Yeah, her name is Ka'aina.
Aha'aina. Is Aha'aina a party?
Very good, very good, very good. It has to do with food. It has to do with the partaking of something, food and eating. So this child was born, and the family belonged to the church, the first Christian church in Kona. And so this child was born on the day that they had the Lord's Supper. And the Lord's Supper is when they serve wine and bread at the church. So this was the very, very first Ka'aina o Kahaku o Yesu in the kingdom of Hawaii. That was the very, very first Lord's Supper in the kingdom of Hawaii. This child was born on that day, and so that child was named Ka'aina o Kahaku. It's a marker name. Yeah. And so it ties back to yours, is that there is a story behind that name that you just gave, Tita. just as Kaha'aina is the story behind it. So names are also stories, mo'olelo. Just as I have one called Earl. My story is called Earl. I have no Hawaiian name. That's the end of my story.
Mahalo, Kumu. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I'd like to share a mo'olelo about my name, because my name is one of those inoas that was based upon something that happened on that day. And my Hawaiian name is Kala Makani. And I remember going to explorations, and the Kumus there were like, windy money? Like what? You know, and I'm named after my great grandfather from Kauai. He was born in Waimea, Kauai. And on this I believe he was born 1849, 50-ish. But in this particular time, there was a man who lived in Honolulu who was very well to do, and anytime he heard that a child was born, he would mount up his saddle on his horse, and he'd take whatever money he had, and the people in the area called him Kawa'a, because he was he was a very prosperous man. He had lots of money in Waimea, in Honolulu. As he rode around, he would give the money to offer to the baby that was born. And on the particular day when my Kūpuna was born, he rode, and there was 3 babies that were born. One born in Lihue, a boy, in Koloa, a girl, and then Waimea, a boy. And the last baby was my Kūpuna. So in Lihue, as this man Kala rode, he gave the first baby all of the gold coins that he had.
Wow.
And then on the ride around to Koloa, he gave all the silver coins he had. When he got to Waimea, he gave whatever left he had, and it was told to me by my great grand aunt, Auntie Amelia. She said that when he gave whatever he had left, he said, "Kala makani, my money is gone in the wind." And they then named that baby, my tutu. They named him Kala makani, and so that's actually him right there. Pretty. So I interestingly in this inoa, one of my Auntie Amelia's brothers was named in honor of their tutu man, Kala makani, and he didn't my granduncle, he didn't like the name because he said that he was going to be poor, but the original Kala Makani was a very, very generous man, and he always helped people, and he grew kalo. And so interesting, because I consider myself to be generous with time and help a lot, and I raise kalo as well. So I just wanted to share that mo'olelo of, I'm named after somebody who was named in this practice of commemorating the events of a day. So yeah, so interesting. Yeah, so every time I share my name, they're like, "Oh, what is that? Windy money?" But yeah, it's it basically means abundance of generosity, where you have nothing left, you've given everything. So yeah, so that's my mo'olelo. So everybody shared one. Okay, who's up next? Let's see here. What about, we got Tina? Who else hasn't shared yet? We got Momi, we've got Ali, we've got Auntie Ida. Auntie Ida, would you like to share a mo'olelo? Oh, okay, my kai. I'm gonna mute and.
So before we go to Auntie Momi, there is in his mo'olelo, there is a wealth of information in that name, and so it's easy. It might conjure up the feeling, oh, poor thing, that baby didn't have that money, but that name is a marker, and it tells the story about this man. That's the beauty of mo'olelo, and it's not supposed to always be beautiful. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes you say, like for instance, the Kane up the street. His brother's name is Atomic, because he was born on the day that the atomic bomb was dropped.
Wow.
I'm not sure. So you see, so this man Kala Makani. Is that what's your name?
That's correct.
Kala Makani. That means is that the picture that comes to me with the Kala Makani is that the money in his hand went away. He said it was either blown away, but in this case it was given away. And so when it came to this person, he had nothing to give, and that nothing to give is a situation that he was in with regards to giving. So he had nothing to give, but he gave this child the name. It's great. It's a great story. Don't change. Don't forget. If you change the name, you're cutting off your lineage when you change the name. And then when you change your name and you get something, a new Hawaiian name, there's no history to that. Your story with I didn't like that name, so I changed the name. That's all you have to give to your kids. But the other children who continue with their name have the full story. Amalela no ka Waiwai o ka inoa. Therein lies the wealth and the richness of the story.
Mahalo Kumu. I feel very blessed to have that name, and in thinking about my mother's generation, some of her brothers weren't given a Hawaiian name because that was kind of the practice of the time to become more Western. So I consider myself very, very lucky to still carry that mo'olelo, and it's one that I will pass on.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can't wait to hear what Auntie Ida has to share. So Auntie Ida, I'm going to spotlight you, and I can't.
Come on, Auntie Ida, it's your turn.
Okay. Aloha. I'm Ida Lucille Kaleho'omahie Hanohano, born and raised in Kaimuki on Oahu. My father is a Hanohano who is from the Hanohano family up on 10th Avenue, and also Punalu'u, Oahu.
Oh my goodness, that Hanohano.
And then my mother is a Ho'opili.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah.
Whew.
So my question is, my Hawaiian name is Kale Ho'omahie, and it was a name that was given to me after I was born.
After you were born.
After I was born. So my mom and dad went to one of his, I think it was his stepmom, to ask for a name. And I was born in February, and then they changed my birth certificate in August. So that's 6 months till I got my Hawaiian name. So I asked my mom if she knew what the meaning was. She didn't know. My dad didn't know. And now they're all gone, yeah? So I don't even know what my name means. And so, but I like it.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Ho'omahie.
Ho'omahie. Kale ho'omahie.
So what does the word mahie means?
When I found in the dictionary, it says it's like coy, like a child. But I don't know.
Well, therein it says, so it would be good for you to just research that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kale ho'omahie. Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah, ho'omahie. Yeah. Urumahie hie. He o mai oe ko nani. There it is in the song.
Yes.
That word in the song. So it would be good for you to take a look at the translation of that song. Yeah. And then try to understand it. And then that's it. Now, I can translate it, but the danger of that is that, and I say is that this is just my translation, but it is not family's translation. So that's what you need to be cautious about how to protect it. So for you, and then it said if you will we should stay in touch. And then after you do some research on that name, and then we talk story a little bit more, and then I will tell you what I think it means.
Okay. Okay.
And unfortunately, you folks won't be there to listen to it, but she may want to write it up and send it to Nick so Nick can send it to you all. It's a beautiful name.
Mahalo.
It's a beautiful name. Yeah.
Mahalo.
Auntie Ida, can you put your do you guys do you know each other? Do you have each other's contact? If not, you can send your email to me and then I can forward it to Kumu Kawaʻa.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, mahalo.
Well, I'll just give it to you.
All right, there. Here we go.
earlkawa'a@gmail.com.
Okay.
All right, I'm putting it in the chat. All right, you guys got the keys to the castle now. Direct line to the Kūpuna.
This castle has many doors.
He's a very popular man, so give him some time to reply. I've been waiting for a while for some replies to email him. So I don't know how you do what you do, Kumu. You are always working and doing something.
It's easy. Just sleep only 1 hour a night.
Oh, there we go. That's words to the wise. Yeah, you can sleep later.
No, you sleep like that. Sometimes I'm so tired. Once I was telling you, I'm so tired. I stop at the stoplight and then I kind of fell asleep, and the guy in the back goes, pap, pap,
Would anyone else like to share a mo'olelo? I'm just looking at some of the names here. I see a Momi Kavelo. Just that last name alone, there's some mo'olelo I know. Momi, would you mind sharing?
Of course. Unfortunately, I married a Kavelo, so I don't actually know any of that.
Hey, don't say unfortunately. That sounds terrible. You should say, fortunately, I'm married. You say, fortunately, I'm married to a Kavelo, but I am a, say it. I am fortunate to be married to a Kavelo, but I am a, say it.
I am fortunate to be married to a Kavelo,
But
I am a Pa'aluhi.
Oh my goodness. That's a Molokai name.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because I have a few cousins that live there. But my dad grew up in Waiwai, and then
Wait. The Pa'aluhi family owned an ili.
Oh,
They owned an ili in Kilohana.
oh, it's good to know.
Good to know.
Gotta do some research. Fortunately, I'm a Pa'aluhi, but I also don't know a lot of any of like my story.
Yeah. So disruption. There was a Pa'aluhi that also played for Oregon State.
Oh, that's my brother's son, David. Yeah, he's a Army Ranger now, so he's stationed in Okinawa now with his family. So he and his wife and 3 babies. Yeah. I guess I could share. My name is Leimomi Pa'aluhi. I've always asked my parents, and like they just gave me that name. I have a sister before me that doesn't have a Hawaiian name, and a sister after me that does not have a Hawaiian name. So I guess I was lucky that I got a Hawaiian name. But I can share my son. When I was 23, I had my first son, and it was a hard pregnancy. I went into early labor, so I had to be bedridden from like 24, 25 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I always dreamed of a name. And back then I wasn't really involved. I didn't really know like a lot of ʻŌlelo Hawaii. I think the extent was just like very simple conversation. I was not immersed or anything, and I would always dream of this name, and I was like, oh, interesting. I don't really know what it is, and I would always dream of it and hear it. So then one day I think I wrote it down there. My sister came to visit me when I was bedridden. I kind of told her, and she was like, oh, that's his name. So it was Ho'oi Kaika Keakua. And then when we looked into it and translated, it was God strengthens. So he has that name now. So that's my story that I can share. And I shared with him so he really understands what it was.
Yeah, so how did that name come to you?
I would, when I would sleep, I would dream, and it would be like somebody would be telling it to me, and I couldn't see the person or identify the person, and it would just come to me, and I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, okay. And I would always like, it reoccurred like every few days. And then I'm like, okay. And then I started writing it down. I was like, I better like get that baby name book and get the Hawaiian dictionary. And so I just kind of started. And then when I wrote it down. And then when I'd go through my day or just be hanging out or I'd have visitors, I would just hear it. And I'd be like, okay, that's interesting. And then I kind of just thought it was, from being pregnant and always hungry and lack of sleep. I would be like, okay, that's weird. I'm just like hearing it while I'm up. And then I kind of stopped dreaming of it and hearing it when I kind of researched it a bit more and then told my older sister, and she said, that's his name. And then we kind of said, oh, that's his name, Alexander Ho'oi Kaikakeakua Kavelo. And then it kind of like, I stopped hearing it and dreaming about it. And then he was born like, he was born at 38 weeks. So he made it well, and he was born fine. So.
Wow. What a story. So comments from the audience to the sharer. Hearing none, take it, Nick.
Okay. Well, mahalo, Mommy, for sharing your mo'olelo. And yeah, really, really an honor to have everyone feel comfortable enough to share. Really, just want to mahalo everyone. So, this is a time for you to unmute and turn your camera on and share a mo'olelo if you'd care to.
Yeah. Just hang on. Okay. Let me go back to ho'i kaikakeakua. So when it comes to her, so this is an inoa and inoa po. It falls under that, falls in that bracket. Those three that I talked about, and inoa po. So it is a it's a I'm lack of words because I understand the power of that name and why that child has that name. So I am afforded a different level of understanding of that name that makes it difficult for me to just blur on it. So, but that meant that in that name is that this child was supposed to make. This child was supposed to be make. And this child made it. He made it. That's what this name is about. Ho'i kaikakeakua. To the power of God, this child lives. That's what it means. Yeah. It's a powerful name.
Oh, what a beautiful inoa.
Now, I shared that with you. You said as an outsider, but and that is, I hope that I'm not violating the family. Yeah, but it may be that I'm adding another dimension to the family's understanding of that name.
Yes, definitely. Mahalo. I appreciate you.
Yeah. So in that story for me, it tells. He said, if you just said the name, you just said, this lady must have gone through some hard times before she gave birth to this child. And now you tell the story. That's what it is. I'm right. That's what happens when you're old and you lose hair and you know. Mahalo for sharing the story. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, well, Uncle Earl, we have
30 minutes. My guy over there, my IT
30
guy.
minutes left. I know.
30 minutes.
Time flies when you're having fun, and we actually have another person queued up and ready to share. So I'm going to be queuing up. We have Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Aloha, aloha, mahalo. So my story is that I was not given a Hawaiian name at birth. My family, my mother's generation story was that they didn't, I guess because of prejudices and cultural things going on at the time, that they didn't want the Chinese side of the family to know that my father was part Hawaiian. Got married, right? So this was a hidden thing. And so I was given an English name, Lisa, Chinese middle name, Yuklin, last name, Wang, married a Dowd. And so I want to circle back to my family name. My Hawaiian grandma's surname was Kuali'i, but we didn't know to ask about it. We went over to her house or my cousin's house. We ran around, played with the cousins, but never got the stories. And so now my grandparents have passed away. My parents have passed away, and I don't have a way to retrieve the stories and reconnect with the Kuali'i name. But other part of my name, my middle name that you see there, Kanoi, is actually part of a law that was given to me, Eua Kanoi. And how that came about was I started hula late in life, in my 20s, and was dancing under the tutelage of Ke'ala Brunke, who was a student of Auntie Nona Beamer. And she came to understand that many of us in her halau did not have Hawaiian names. So she asked if Auntie Nona would give us names. So my name was given to me by Auntie Nona. Interestingly enough, we really didn't have a lot of, close history with her, but so how she came about the names, I'm going to assume through inspiration, through prayer, and Ka'ewa Kanoi, as she explained to me, meant the rising of the mist. Rising of the mist, upwelling of emotions.
The rising of the mist, yeah.
And so when she said this, of course, my upwelling of emotions, the rising of my tears, I was crying. And I always love the image of, when a waterfall comes down and the mist that comes off the face of the waterfall, in the air, just that was my vision of it. Well, fast forward to, what is it now? 20, 30, 40, okay, almost 40 years later, here I am. We have moved onto the Aina on Moku Keawe in Pepe'ekeo, and I have changed careers and become a mahi'ai. I am growing food on the Aina. And what is special about this place that cemented the connection to my name is you can see this is a view behind me looking Makai from our land, and what happens sometimes, the weather here is astonishing and dramatic, but I would see coming from Makai, the fog, the mist comes up the hill, creeping up until it shrouds and surrounds our home. So the rising mist tells me that I am home. I am where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm meant to be doing.
Wonderful story. Wonderful story. So your family name, what is your family name?
Kuali'i.
Kuali'i. You know who Kuali'i is?
I did some research, and he was what I came up with. He was a chief on Oahu, but I don't know more than that.
Yeah. In Kailua, there's that ulupo heau, and the ulupo heau sits on the edge of Kauai Nui. Now it's called Marsh. Yeah. We got to get it back to Kauai Nui Lagoon, and we got to get that back to Kauai Nui Pond. Well, Kuali'i was a very, very powerful, high-ranking ali'i in that area of Kailua. Kuali'i. So you have ali'i blood. And with regards to your families having prejudice and didn't want that as yet, we cannot help that. We cannot help that. And we need to understand the times of that generation. Rather than saying, oh, they were prejudiced like that, they said, don't get PTSD over it. It's just understand it that those were the times, and it was the way to protect the family. It was the way to protect the family's possession. Now, the bigger picture is that, the Ali'is did that also to protect their name and they protected their wealth. And then it doesn't matter what color Ali'i you are, black, white, brown, is that we married each other. Yeah? And that was a form of generational prejudice of that time. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that our children were protected. We wanted to make sure that the wealth that we had was stayed within the hands. And I said, so don't feel bad about it. Use that story to help yourself, to help others understand that today is the new time, and when we are afforded that ability to see the greater acts of our ancestors to enrich our life.
Mahalo, mahalo. I did do a little research on Kuali, the chief, and I believe he did pass I think it's called a Kanawai edict that farmers and fishermen should share their food, give their food out to others, to feed others, and so that is what I find myself doing. So it's a kuleana.
Yeah, well, he did that. He did that in Kailua because that is the biggest fish pond in the entire archipelago. 550 acres. So he had lots to give, so it was easy for him to give because he had so much to give. He gave because, but by the same token, he could be very, very stingy and anunu that he didn't have to share. He chose to share. Back to you, Nick. Thank you.
Hello.
Mahalo for that mo'olelo. I was kind of getting choked up when you were sharing. I was just struck by the fact that, even though sometimes we don't know why we were named or it hasn't been revealed yet, maybe because of, generations and time. Interestingly, we are all on a path that's guided by our Kūpuna. And you are walking in this same path along these same footsteps. And that's actually something I learned from Kumu Kawaʻa in his class, that we are guided by the ways of our Kūpuna. So I just wanted to make that connection to some ike I had learned before to what you shared. And mahalo nui for sharing that mo'olelo. And to everyone, I saw an old friend unmute his camera. I see an old friend, Matt, from our time together. Matt, would you care to share a mo'olelo?
Aloha, Nick. Aloha. How's it? Oh, got away. I'm in the classroom. The kids went out to play, so I got some time I could get on. My story is simple, though. Matthew William Holt.
Matthew William Holt.
There's no Hawaiian in that. But I was named after both my grandfathers. My mother's dad, Mateo Chang. I got Matthew. My dad's dad, William Moteno Holt, and I got William. So that's Matthew William Holt. And same thing at the time. My parents wanted us to be Americanized. They wanted the best for us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my story.
Matthew William Holt. Wow, what a nice name! It's a nice name to run for president.
I think that's next on my things to do. I think
I'd vote for you, Matt.
Hey, I was actually thinking of being vice president. I was looking for someone else to be president, maybe Earl Kawa'a.
Yeah. Okay. But you see, you can be the president of the bank. You can be the president of Hawaii Insurance Company. You can be the president of Kamehameha Schools. The headmaster of there. It'd be a nice ring to it.
Matt, I have a question for you. Matt, do you have children?
Aye.
And what did you name your kids a Hawaiian name by any chance?
Aye. So my first daughter, I wrote home to my mom. Here, I was living in California, and I wrote home to my mom, and she came up with the name Pualani. heavenly flower. And it didn't come from a dream. It didn't come from any special place. I mean, my mom is Korean Spanish, so it was just something that she liked. My second daughter, I actually called my grandmother. She's full on Korean, but she was just looking up at the ko'olau that morning, and she saw up by Keahiakahoe the clouds that gather up there, the mist, and so Kanoe Lani she came up with heavenly mist.
Oh, so where is Keahiakahoe?
Keahiakahoe is here in Heia. It's the highest point on the ko'olau.
So do you know the story of Keahiakahoe?
Hi.
Go ahead, tell the story.
Long ago, there were 3 siblings that always were fighting with each other, and their parents finally said, "Hey, it's time to leave. Get out of the house. You guys have to go." So they lived in Eva. They came over the mountains. They came and settled here in Kaneohe.
Very good.
Kahoe, he settled up here in the uplands, and he was a mahiai. He was a farmer, and he farmed his kalo, his mai'a, his wala. His brother Pahu moved down a hill overlooking Kaneohe Bay above Safeway, and he built his place up there. And he went down, and he was a fisherman, Lawaiʻa. So he would go out to sea or fish in the bay. And his sister Lo'e, she actually settled on the island in Kaneohe Bay, Moku'olo'e. People call it Coconut Island, but
Coconut Island. Okay, that's good.
But Moku'olo'e, and that's where she lived, and she was a gatherer. So she went out and got opi'i, maybe limu, maybe catch opai. They would get together and share their resources with each other. So Kahoe would bring his kalo and his wala. Pahu would bring his i'a, and Lo'e would bring whatever she gathered. One day, Lo'e was watching Pahu on the beach, and she saw, oh wow, he came in, he had a huge ulua, and she thought, oh, tonight is gonna be the night we're gonna get some good i'a. But when Pahu came that evening, he only brought manini. So Lo'e, she was kind of hoo-hoo a little bit, and she went and talked to Kahoe and said, hey, Kahoe, God, I know every time you bring your kalo, it's the best kalo you have, the best uala that you have grown, that you share with us. But today I seen Pahu caught one ulua, and he only brought manini. So, Kahoe didn't say anything at the time, but months down the road, when there was a time of famine, people used to make their imu at night, so other people couldn't see the smoke. So Lo'e, she's hungry. Pahu, he's hungry too. But Kahoe still had his sweet potato. He had his food, so he was building his imu at night. And Lo'e happened to be by Pahu one day, and Pahu was looking up at the smoke coming up the side of the mountain there. And he said, oh, wow. In his mind, he knew, oh, Kahoe, he didn't want imu, man. And he's cooking food. But he's not sharing because... And Lo'e looked over at him and said, hey, Pahu, see the smoke. Ke'ahia Kahoe. A fire of Kahoe. Pahu shook his head because he knew he didn't share, and now Kahoe is not sharing. So that's the mo'olelo.
Wonderful. That's mo'olelo. That's the importance of mo'olelo. So what happens, as I said, so I may add, that's the story of that, and that's mo'olelo. That's a story of that place. And so our youngsters need to hear that story, and dads and moms and teachers in that area should tell that story. Because in that story you can talk about sharing, you can talk about being a nunu, you can talk about attitudes and behaviors, that help and that's not helpful. So what happened is that place was called Ke'ahia Kahoe, Yeah, Keahi Akahoi means kaho is kaho is fire. But what it really talks about is that brother was stingy. He didn't want to share his food. So that's why he cooked it at night. But the sister and the other younger brother saw the smoke, and so when they went up there, they saw what he had. They saw what he had, and he was not willing to share. So they named that mountain over there Keahi Akahoi for us today. Yeah, Keahi Akahoi is like a title of a book. So when we go to Keahi Akahoi, the mountain, that whole story should come. That's the way. That's Ike Hawaii. This is a good example of Ike Hawaii. It is named, the name of that mountain is when you go there and you translate it, or if you're lucky to have a kumu like this that knows the story, yeah, is that it can be revealed. When it's revealed, it becomes Ike Hawaii. So he didn't change the story. It's the essence of the story that he told is there. Is there. So my IT guy, who's very helpful to keep me calm by showing me that we only have 12 minutes left, and to set up my computer, I had to come all the way in from Kailua because I'm a computer low, so I got this guy to come over here, and he's actually sitting here, and he's he's watching my so I can concentrate on the topic and not worry about the technical stuff. Thank you, brother, for helping me.
Yeah, mahalo, Matt, for sharing. And I really just want to mahalo you for working with our preschoolers, our young ones, and and I feel very confident in our future with you there, telling these mo'olelos and keeping them alive. Yeah, so just want to send a big mahalo to you, Matt, and thank you for all you do. All right, and I'd like to open it up. We have just a few minutes left, so if anybody has that burning desire inside to share a mo'olelo, now is the time. As Kumu Kawaʻa would say, "Aole makau," do not be afraid. Yeah, those of you who took his class, you know what I'm talking about. So I see Tina, and is it Ali? So would one of you be brave and share one more mo'olelo for us? I see Ali is the quick draw here. Sorry, Tina, you're gonna have to hold on. Okay, so Ali, quick draw, is gonna be sharing. Take it away, Ali. Mahalo.
Aloha, everybody. So Ali is short for Allison. I am the youngest of 7.
Youngest of 7.
So this is how we roll. It's Ashlyn, Agnes, Avery, Jarrett, Jordan, Elaine, and Allison. So Takane, Jordan, and Jarrett have Korean middle names. The women, the Wahine, have Hawaiian middle names. So I am my dad is Korean. My mama is Hawaiian. She is of Kekua Nui and Kikino. That is her lineage. Molokai and Maui. Yeah. So
those Kokinos on Maui, they're rough buggers, boy.
Even on Oahu. Kolohe, let's just say Kolohe. Anyway, I remember being about in the 7th grade. The Kaho'olawe was really big, yeah. And in the 70s, Sand Island, Mauliola, all the squatters was happening, and what was his name? Ariyoshi, I believe, would have them all cleaned out. So a lot of my ohana, we never know the word squatting or homeless. We was just camping. So for me to share about where I am from, I really never know. We had a house in Kaneohe, but we was always in Kalihi. We was always at Sand Island. We was always on Silver Street. That's where my the Kikino Ohana had house over there. But anyway, when I remember asking my mom, why we get this kind of Haole name? And she just That's what she wanted. And along the lines of how come she didn't ʻŌlelo Hawaii, because she was raised by her tutu. Her mama passed away when my mommy was probably about 2 years old in giving birth to our younger sibling. So a lot of stuff my mom did not want to share. Yeah, and it's very sore for me. And the Kūpuna that we do have left, even asking them, you just get the impression like kahuna ana, you know, where things just cannot be talked because it just would turn. And so, but anyway, back to our Inoa, it was just, she wanted everything to be Western. She wanted to be able to, for us to survive. I was like, Mom, hello, I was born in the 60s. All that you think is pau.
Yeah.
Yeah. About not being able to ʻŌlelo Hawaii or you know, the truth be said, my mom never liked being Hawaiian. Oh, that's so hurt me to say. She never liked. And she never expounded or she never shared with anybody. These are things, and my Kūpuna today, like I have only grand aunts left, none of them want to talk about it. So, you know, we just gotta sit and the ike Hawaii of others brings things back to me. You know, so hanging out and sponging off of Kumu Kawaʻa helps me to be again. You know, whatever my name may be, whatever place I go, he brings that all back together. You know, even being a Christian, I had a hard time. I had a hard time. But back to the Inoa stuff, because I love bala'au all kind. But yeah, so we all get haole names, and I don't like it, but I got to remember that's something that was given to me by my mama. So I honor that in that way. So mahalo.
Yeah, just like me, I have an English name, but I don't have any PTSD over it. Get over it, because with that name is the story behind it. Why I got that name. It's a malela no ka Waiwai no ke kapa ana o ka Inoa. So if I didn't have this name, Earl, I wouldn't have a Hawaiian name. I wouldn't have this other story to talk about my sister. So it's a marker. It's a marker name. It's important. So we should let go of that kamaha. If your kamaha is that your mama didn't want you folks to learn, or want to say, get over it. Get over it. There's a life to live to its fullest. And I said, if you want to drag the eke hulu hulu with a lot of rocks in it, that's up to you. But don't drag it in class and to make our students feel bad about it. If you want to feel bad, you keep it to yourself. Don't put your kaumaha on the students in telling stories. Just tell the stories clean. Nick, brother said we only have 5 minutes, so you got 5 minutes.
We do only have 5 minutes, but I just wanted to say mahalo, Ali, for sharing your mo'olelo, and you know, for caring, you know, and you know, mahalo for that, and that you know, I honor your mo'olelo and your feelings. So mahalo for sharing them and feeling comfortable enough to share them with us all. We have Tina. Can you give us a 2-minute? Because I want to honor you.
I'll try my fastest.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Similar story, so a lot of same.
Wait, hang on, Nick. Nick, you still have the power of when to cut this off, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so tell your story.
I'll be quick, but mahalo, and mahalo for everybody sharing all theirs. I mean, it's just an honor to be in the same virtual class with all of you folks. So mahalo. I'm the last of 7 children. I have 6 brothers, and I'm the only girl.
Oh.
None of my brothers were given Hawaiian names, and maybe just because my mom finally listened to my dad and gave one of us kids a Hawaiian name. And my dad was Holly. My dad was from Wisconsin. My mother was from Keaukaha. And it was my father of all people that was really encouraging my mother to ask, the in-laws, ask my grandparents for Hawaiian names for all of us. But my mom refused. Maybe same idea. She comes of that generation where she was afraid of having a Hawaiian name for all of us. And because we're here on the mainland, I'm in Illinois, and I was born here. But we're very connected to our ohana well, my dad is from Wisconsin, my mom's from Keaukaha, so I tell everybody I'm a pineapple picking cheddarhead. Anywho, I'm the last of 7, and she finally gives one of us a Hawaiian name. So I was born with Tina Marie Momilani Gleason. And surprisingly, my brothers weren't who that I had the Hawaiian name. In fact, they were very happy that somebody finally had,
they were happy. That's good.
In the family. And my tutu lady had already passed, so my mom didn't ask anybody for the name. She came up with it instantly. And supposedly the reason I heard why she came up with Momilani is that she finally got her pearl from heaven, and she always loved pearls. And she kept trying to have a daughter, because she said to everybody that I was just born to be her hula dancer. And amazingly, she did raise me to learn hula all my life. So she was very connected to her lineage, and so I was fortunate to live in Keaukaha for a short period of time with one of my aunties, and so we were very raised in our culture. And my father, despite him not being of the culture, he got all into it. He was all into the genealogy, and he really admired, I think because he didn't have much of a culture in Wisconsin, maybe, that he loved my mom's culture and the family. And he was all into genealogy, and so we were very fortunate to be raised. And she was very proud to be Hawaiian, but scared to give us Hawaiian names. So that's my story, and mahalo I tried to hopefully got a minute. So mahalo. Got a minute.
Mahalo.
Oh, wonderful. All from Idaho, huh?
Illinois, even further.
Illinois. Okay,
Yeah.
Illinois.
I'm in the cold area.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, okay, so I'm going to. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So I am going to present this, and I just wanted to mahalo everyone first of all for being willing to first show up today, and to being willing to share your mo'olelos and hearing the mo'olelos of others. I want to mahalo Kumu Kawaʻa for sharing your time and your ike with us this morning, and just truly all that you've done to perpetuate the practices of our ancestors, and to freely share what you've learned, and the encouragement that you've given us all to continue to learn about ourselves, about our ancestors, wherever we come from, to honor them all and to continue to tell those mo'olelos for the next generation. So mahalo Kumu Kawaʻa for all that you've done. And I just want to mahalo everybody for coming. And from the bottom of our hearts here,
Hi.
Kumu, go ahead.
No, you continue. Finish. I'm just up on what you're saying. Just finish. Continue going.
I just wanted to mahalo everybody again for joining us today. So.
Yep.
You're up, Kumu. Go ahead, wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up. Yes, So like po be kahaiana o Nick to add to his stories, as a maua mau ka ike Hawaii. Continue to reach into the past, so and to bring it forward, no ka ike no na Hawaii imu o mako for our children and our grandchildren before us. It says, we have a rich heritage, and so we must believe that it is rich, and to exercise that richness is that we must be willing to share it, and to share it with families, to share it with children, to share it at work. So, ke ku nei wau makapuka o ka ohale a malela e ha'i wau. Yes, I stand at my door, and from my door I teach, and from my door I preach. What that means is that the knowledge that I have is my family, and you all have yours. So when you tell your story, you honor your family. You honor your family. Ai ka manawa e hui pua na kākou. Until we meet again. Aloha.